Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Caroline Colas, and I am the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. And I am delighted to be your host today on the Positive Psychology Hour, a series that we do in partnership with Whole Being Institute that is curated by Phoebe Atkinson. Today, we're going to be talking about raising resilient teens with Dr. Sherry Kelly and her daughter, Kaitlin Kelly. Teens are more isolated and more marginalized than ever before, even though they may seem connected through internet and social media. How can we raise teens to be more resilient in times of uncertainty? And can we teach them the skills and mindset to become happier? And what can they teach us? The co-founders of Positivity Teens will share high-impact positive psychology strategies that both teens and parents can use every day to write a positive code for self-efficacy, coping, and life flourishing. Dr. Skylar Kelly here is a clinical psychologist, a neuropsychologist with more than 30 years of experience in the field of child development and health psychology. She is a frequent guest on our Positive Psychology Hour, and she will be our guest on Monday for our Brain Health Awareness series. I hope you will all turn in. I'll put that in the chat. She is based in West Hartford, Connecticut, and also in Florida. She's best known for her research with teens and young adults on resilience, hope, and cancer survivorship. And she is the founder of Positivity Teens, which offers workshops for students, parents, and educators on the impact of digital technology on the developing brain. And Kaitlin is the 18-year-old co-founder of Positivity Teens workshops. In 2018, Kaitlin was personally impacted by a high school shooting in her childhood hometown of Parkland, Florida. That day, she witnessed through the live social media feeds the unfolding violence upon friends and former neighbors while she sat in her school one town over. The secondary trauma, as well as the development cost of violence depicted in consumer entertainment platforms, inspired her to take action to address the psychosocial impact of the violence, depersonalization, bullying, and negativity that permeates social media. Kaitlin and her mom, Dr. Sherry Kelly, developed an empowering program, which they're going to share a little bit about today, of positive psychology and cognitive behavioral strategies to support and educate all of us, students, teachers, and parents, while providing evidence-based interventions that promote greater emotional resilience. Welcome to the call, both of you. I'm so honored to have you here. And I know we could spend 2 hours talking about what you are doing. So I'm going to let you just take it away right now and get right into your material. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Caroline, for that beautiful introduction. It's wonderful to be back. I can see some of my old friends here in the gallery, and I'm so thrilled to be with my favorite coworker, my daughter, Kaitlin. We just celebrated, or I should say honored, our 4th anniversary of starting Positivity Teens, which we started in 2018. And through that time, our efforts have really expanded beyond, trying to provide mental health care and promote access to care for teens from, school violence, then to helping gain support and access to mental health care during the COVID pandemic. And now we've expanded globally, and Kaitlin and I have spoken to teens around the globe, and we now have a new initiative where we're helping young people who are stuck in Ukraine and or who are new refugees seeking to get out of Ukraine and crossing the border. So that's a very interesting and exciting development in our program. So today we're going to talk to you a little bit about what is really making teens so distressed. This has been going on even before COVID happened, and now it's just been accelerated. So I'm going to try to share the screen, and hopefully that will work. There it is. I hope everybody can see this, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm just gonna, can I just do that? Yep. All right. All right. So we're going to talk about what it's like being a teen in the social media age, because that is really what is driving a lot of distress. Right now, we have an epidemic of distress. 1 in 5 children, now it's globally, 1 in 5 US teens and global population of teens has at least one serious mental health disorder. 20 to 25% of teens right now have experienced significant emotional distress during COVID. 40% of college students report distress that's so significant that it impacts their daily functioning and impacts their studies.
Sherry, for a minute, would you just unshare and reshare, because we have a line in the middle that can sometimes happen.
Yeah, I'm not sure why, but we'll try it again. There it is. There it is. Thank you.
There we go.
Hey, so a study was just published this week that explains how visits by teenagers to emergency rooms during the pandemic doubled for eating disorders. And Kaitlin's seen that in teens that she knows.
Yeah, I witnessed it firsthand. I go to boarding school, so I'm in a residential community around my school. So I don't only go to school with the students around me, but I also live with them most of the year, 8 months out of the year, 9 months out of the year. So to see them going through things like this and leaving our campus to deal with things like that, it has definitely escalated in the last 4 years that I've been at my boarding school, for sure, even in that small community. So I can only imagine what it's like in the larger communities, like in Manhattan and the larger cities as well.
So, you know, there are a couple reasons for this that are broad generalizations, but people always want to know why. And one of the reasons is that this is a manifestation of anxiety, of depression, of trying to somehow manage emotions or deal with the energy of emotions, and they don't have a way to do it effectively. And also some kids, you know, have other disorders that have been amplified during COVID. So maybe they had mild anxiety, and now over the past 2 years, a series of different events and multiple factors in their lives have pushed them to the point of having significant mental distress. And one very unfortunate yet common form of mental distress is an eating disorder. So why should we be concerned? Well, you know, kids today have more opportunities than ever before, yet they're so unhappy. They're more connected than ever before, yet very isolated. Oftentimes, they're not true connections. So they're interconnected by the internet or social media, yet in a very real way, they're very isolated. So Kaitlin and I are working and actually using social media for a good thing, a good cause, and using you know, the digital technology for good cause in Ukraine. And this is a task force that we're on. It's through the Mental Wellness Society International, which is an NGO, it's a 501c3. And there's the link if you want to learn more about it. There's the link to it. Or you can just go to Mental Wellness Society International and learn more. So, you know, Kaitlin and I have had the opportunity to speak to really over 1,000 kids this past year due to COVID. And these are some of the common challenges that kids report to us in our webinars. And I'm going to go through these with Kaitlin and we'll talk about each one. COVID basically turned your life upside down, and kids today, like adults, have much less control over their lives than they did before COVID. In psych terms, you went from having maybe a strong internal locus of control to an external locus of control. And not only did you lose control, but the rules of the game shifted. 1 minute, you were told one thing, another minute you were told another thing. And the inconsistency of messaging made it very difficult for young people to cope. One of the things that coping is predicated upon is the need for consistency and trusting yourself and being able to feel like you have a sense of control. And this didn't happen. Their lives were derailed, right? And you can talk a little bit about how life changed, and I'll let you take the next two.
Yeah, so something that I actually told my mom while I was battling not only COVID myself, but also just everything that went along with it at my boarding school, as well as we were still living on campus throughout the vast majority of the pandemic. And I told her that everything around me had changed, literally where I slept, how I ate. We had cold meals for, I'd say, 10 or 12 days in a row, how I was learning,
How you're breathing.
how I was breathing, how I was getting home, how I was seeing my parents. And the only thing that didn't change was the exceedingly high expectations that the adults around me had for me and my fellow classmates.
And I think that was really a poignant insight that she had, that, you know, the expectations of our kids stayed the same, even though they changed how they went to school, changed how they lived, changed their socializing, derailed their development, but they still felt like teachers and adults still expected them to get A's, still expected them to be good kids, still expected them to get into a good college.
Right. And it's almost even gotten worse kind of now that we're at the back end of the pandemic. It's almost gotten worse where they think, okay, everything's back to a somewhat normalcy, but that's obviously not the case. And I don't think we'll ever get back to where we were pre-pandemic. So I think it's going to take a lot of communication and effort to share that message. But I think starting here is a good way to do so.
Yeah.
So,
and, you know,
talking about it's important.
A lot of, you know, teachers are really frustrated. They tell me that, you know, the kids have lost so much in terms of their education and that they're behind. And the kids feel frustrated. And it's, you know, I think the kids feel a lot of pressure to catch up, or they're expected to be, you know, in 11th grade math, but they really haven't had solid math since 9th grade. So, you know, I think that is something to consider and maybe discuss with your teenagers or your grandkids, is to clarify expectations that you have about your kids or grandkids, and ask them to clarify, well, what are the expectations they have of themselves? And sometimes in that wide range between your expectations and their expectations lies unhappiness. And we're going to talk more about that later. But as you can see in this equation from Moga Dot, who's a brilliant man, former chief business officer of Google, and he has written on happiness and also on digital technology, that happiness is greater to or equal than the events of your life minus your expectations of how life should behave. So, you know, when one of the things that kids also learn is learned helplessness, that they feel that anything they do is not going to make a difference, that they're sort of trapped, that it's not good enough, or that they have lost any empowerment. The other thing we've talked about is isolation. You want to talk a little bit about feeling isolated from peers and friends?
Yeah, so the isolation, especially during COVID, was so hard. And I think technology almost exacerbated that, because I would see, especially being in Massachusetts where COVID was worse, and also it was harder for me to communicate with my friends because we were living in a residential community. We were all living together. So we had an extra level of security and safety that was in place for COVID. Going on social media was very difficult to see my friends here having more freedom because they did go to a day school. And so learning different ways to cope with that and to tell myself moments where I just needed to stop and realize that it wasn't helping me in any way, made me realize that there are ways to help cope. And for me, that was sometimes really simple ways, like the friend living next door to me. It'd be having a face-to-face conversation over FaceTime or on Zoom, or Zooming someone that wasn't able to come back to my boarding school because he was international. Just having those conversations, even if it is over the phone in the dire situations like that, is so much better than just sitting on your bed and going through social media like
just
that.
scrolling,
Yeah.
because during the teenage years, social relationships are so important to maturing and to learning, and that was taken away from the kids. The other thing that's been very difficult for kids and causes depression and anxiety is uncertainty of future. And, the future has come faster to these kids, and it's very uncertain that often, they feel like what they expected out of their schooling and what they expected out of the future or hope for in the future is going to be very different in the post-COVID world. And, just in terms of trying to find a job after college and thinking about careers, and am I going to go to work? Am I going to be doing everything online? And the isolation has also interrupted their social maturation. These kids aren't socializing in the same way, and that also has to do with the future. What will relationships look like in the future?
Right.
And they need more support than they're getting. I know one university in New York where I worked, we had 12 counselors, yet they had, 20,000 students on campus. There's not enough psychological support for these kids. There's two people in the chat, or two questions maybe in the chat, Caroline, and I'm not sure if someone has a question real quick.
I didn't see them.
Okay, awesome. So, one of the biggest mediators of the problem, good or bad, is technology. And the reminder here is that technology should support relationships we have with others and not replace it. So this is what Kaitlin said. So I'm going to let her read this slide because this is what she relayed in an interview earlier this year.
Well, I know we already talked about kind of the first point here, so I'll move on to the second one, which is digital technologies affecting teenage health and well-being, due in part to the decreased purpose in life and direction and motivation matched with an overconsumption of social media. So I think a lot of that has to deal with what I feel as though my purpose is going to be in life. I think it's been a lot harder to discover that. I know it has been for me and a lot of my fellow classmates, because the classroom has been so isolating and it's changed so much. Obviously, a lot of it was via Zoom. And so that's hard to discover what your passions are that way. And especially as someone who's going into college, it can feel like you're very, very lost. And so there are ways, however, to cope with that. And I think a lot of it does have to do with positive uses of social media. I think there's a lot of ways to get connected. For me, it's doing things like this with my mom. For me, going on LinkedIn, connecting with people who are out there doing good for the world in areas that I want to possibly do in the future, networking with people from my high school who are alumni. So it's taken some more steps. And I think it's hard because I think a lot of kids don't think about it now. I think they're just stuck, right? Because they don't know what to do. It's something you don't naturally do, right. I think, as quickly.
So our point is that kids and parents need to help kids do this. Kids need to shift the way that they're thinking, okay? Even though the future is uncertain, you have more control than you realize, and you have to shift your thinking and take charge. In psychology, refer to this as behavioral activation, okay? And you can take charge by making goals or deciding you want to explore an interest. Maybe it's not going to be the biggest passion of your life, but at least it's something to explore. Make more connections, like Kaitlin said, network with alumni from your school, or network with people in an interest area or an internship you hope to have one day. Still pursue the future. And you can't wait to feel better to start taking steps towards your future. In fact, if you start taking steps towards your future, you will feel better. So we want to show you this, Kaitlin. I'm going to show you this. Kaitlin found this on the internet the other day, and this is a girl on TikTok, and I'm just trying to see how to, I'll let Kaitlin do it. She's technological.
Stop the loop. Scrolling, liking, commenting, sharing. It feels like we're all on this app having a great time, but where is everyone? You're sitting alone in your room right now, scrolling on a little rectangle in your hand. And why? Because you started to think about life for a second and got super anxious and you thought you would distract yourself, right? And now every time you start to feel this way, you just pull out your little device and wait until the feeling passes. But it's not working. Look at us. Anxiety, depression, memory problems, impatience, addiction, insecurity, fake lives, selfishness, loneliness. We know that the more we consume, the worse we feel. So why don't you just stop the loop? Scrolling, liking.
Pretty powerful stuff, right? So, we've had years of research now that has found that an association between time online and reported emotional distress among teens. And when you look at this chart, anxiety and depression and bullying are the two highest loading factors. Then comes drug addiction and alcohol. But you can see that there is a correlation. I'm not saying causation right now, but there is a correlation. I personally think it's causation, but I'll just say scientifically, we know there's a correlation between the amount of time one spends online and then reported depression and anxiety. So to put this in another perspective, the Roman Colosseum of yesteryear, 2,000 years ago, where entertainment happened, juries made their choices and sentenced people, where the great dramas of society were played out, where athletics were played out, where social drama occurred between people, where propaganda occurred. All took place in the Roman Colosseum. Well, guess what? This is the Roman Colosseum today. It's in the palm of your hand. So you're carrying all of that stuff in the palm of your hand. And I think that was one of the most insightful experiences that we talk about is the impact of what Kaitlin has seen in the palm of her hand and what her same age peers have seen. And it's really frightening when you think about what they're exposed to, what their developing brains are exposed to from a very young age till now. And, you have to think about the progressive and the cumulative impact of that on development. So, we see the impact of social media on kids' behaviors, on violence. This is from South Korea, where it's interesting. South Korea has the most social media use per capita. They also have the most plastic surgeons per square mile, I believe. There is a great amount of pressure on young people, especially girls, to fit a certain image, and looks are really valued even more than here. And this is just a story about a young celebrity who was really pressured on social media, and she killed herself. So what we tell kids is that your diet's not only what you eat, it's what you watch, what you listen to, what you read, the people you hang out with, what you're subjecting yourself to. So there's another strategy. Be mindful of the things you're putting into your body, the things you're interacting with, the people you're interacting with online. Because so much of it, wouldn't you say, is negative?
Right, but also I think social media has had this impact on the teenage world that shows that we're being so much more observers than we should be. We're not really being enactors anymore. We're just observing and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and liking and observing what other people are doing instead of enacting change ourselves or doing things ourselves. which is kind of what I was talking about before. Again, is making those connections, initiating yourself. I think sometimes, myself included, I'm afraid to go out and make change or go out and try to help myself progress, because I'm afraid, because I'm so used to just observing on social media.
That's a good point.
Or behind the scenes, or, you know, you're just doing it in your bed, nobody's watching you. But once you break that habit, your world changes. And so that's what the message that we're trying to get out as well.
So one of the things that we explain to kids, which is really powerful in getting them to shift their behaviors, is to explain how social media works and how the internet works. And when we tell them that you're actually the product, not only the consumer, they're a little stunned and surprised, but then they get it. The NIH studies found that the average teen spends about 8 hours per day on social networking sites. So not just their computers, but scrolling on social networking sites. And that correlates with higher levels of anxiety and depression. So that's, you know, since COVID, kids are really giving up like more than 2 days of their week in terms of hours scrolling through social media. That's a lot of their life to give up. The average teen checks their phone 160 times a day. That might not surprise anybody. So is media and tech all that bad? Well, no, it's not all that bad. Obviously, it exposes you to new knowledge and ideas and makes connections. It makes tasks easier, faster. It is an explosion of knowledge. Speed of communication is turbo fast. You have access to the whole world. We're talking here today from around the world with everyone on here. So there are many positives. But we also, you know, tell kids and parents about the risks and the negative impact. There's a negative health impact on sleep, weight. You're sedentary when you're scrolling 8 hours a day. Problem solving, you become less adept, I believe, at problem solving. It's easier just to look up the problem and not figure it out yourself. Also, exposure to inappropriate content, as well as fake content or unsafe content, and people who are not good people to have in your lives. And compromise confidentiality and privacy by your digital footprint, that, you know, companies are watching and bad actors are watching. Yeah. The other negative is the exposure to blue light, and a lot of exposure to blue light that can have an impact on your attention, on your eyes, disruption of hormones like melatonin that will disrupt sleep. It might delay sleep. You shouldn't be scrolling and reading or watching on a video, for example, within 45 minutes of sleep. And we're both guilty of doing that. I'm the first one to admit it's hard not to do it. What's interesting is that even adults now are getting most of their entertainment from streaming services and YouTube rather than the television. So we're all living this life online. So the other thing we talk about is that the developing brain is not meant to be a video arcade, okay? The brain actually doesn't like that false stimulation, getting at it all the time. The brain has been developing for tens of thousands of years to be a survival type of animal that hunts and seeks and protects itself. And that's the main purpose of the brain, is to survive. And that survival came from being a proactive being. Now our selves are being trained to be reactive beings. So this is I guess, a very dramatic change in how our brains are working with digital technology. As you know, video addiction has become a real problem. You know, media provides access to, you know, instant stimulation, and we become, or the brain becomes accustomed to rapid feedback. Kaitlin can talk about this too. Just in socialization, she sees, you know, boys that would rather just be playing video games than talking or doing sports.
100%. I'd say there's a vast majority, which is why I think what my school does is really, really great, where they require us to do extracurriculars every term of the school year. So every single day after school, we have to be doing something.
You're not just on your phone.
Whether that is sport, community service, or arts. So I've really, really enjoyed it. I think it's something that's now become part of my daily routine as well. I think it's really, really good for the brain, especially as someone who's you're sitting in a classroom all day and then you come home and want to play
a
more
video game.
games. That's not good for the
It's
body.
not good for the body or the brain. Inside your brain, there's a processing system. It's in both the basal ganglia and the thalamus, and it's like a metronome in there. And it likes movement, it's set, it's timed. And as a neuropsychologist, I'm very interested in how some of these games and apps can actually disrupt that internal metronome. So what happens is that certain types of technology actually makes the brain downshift to accommodate for all that high-speed stimuli that's coming at it. So your processing speed actually gets slower, and the brain seems to be like waiting for that stimulation to come. And I call it kind of like lazy brain. Some people call it cognitive tindering. We'll talk about that. So when we talk to teens and kids about this, it really helps them realize how they're being compromised by so much social media. And it, I guess, motivates them to try to take more control over their lives and spend less time on social media. So I'm gonna stop right here and see if there's any questions.
I think that it's just fascinating what you're talking about. We don't have any questions in the chat. I hope this session's recordings will be available. Yes, Gila, it will absolutely be available. We'll send it out. So just keep going.
So, you know, this is an important study that was done a couple of years ago, 2020. And yes, there's such a thing as smartphone addiction. We invest, you know, we've seen this where persons with smartphone addiction actually went into a scanner, an fMRI scanner, and they can actually see, and there's also studies that have been done with PET scans. They can see that there's lower gray matter volume in the brain. So the brain is storing less. And there's less volume. There's also studies that showed slower activity in certain parts of the brain. So, you know, there's a cost to being addicted to gaming and social media, and it's a very big cost. So technology is neither good or bad, nor is it neutral. And I love this by Melvin Kranzberg. It's the thing that makes technology not neutral is that it enables certain kinds of relating while disabling other kinds of relating to each other. Now, and I say the same thing with education, that technology cannot replace a teacher, because it's the relationship between the teacher and the student that really facilitates learning. You can't replace a real life relationship with a automated one or artificial intelligence. So, Kaitlin, this is really something that you can relate to, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's what a lot of us, especially women, I think a lot of us go on social media and just immediately it's a source of comparison. And for me, there's a quote that I keep on in my dorm room: comparison is a thief of joy. Comparison is really is, because I noticed that when I even take a day off from social media, when I know there's just going to be a crazy busy day, especially like now we're on break, I know, okay, like just don't look at all the vacations and everything like that. It helps me personally. I realize that I feel so much better when I don't do that innate comparison, because again, like, you don't see everything that's going on behind that image.
Kids make a lot of fake videos. They make fake. There's companies that help kids make fake screenshots or fake Instagram
billions
profiles.
Of editing.
Yeah. You know,
apps
seriously, they even sell these kits to make a fake high impact Instagram posts. So people think you're on a private jet. They actually sell like a toilet seat in the kit. So it looks like a plane window from the back, and they sell a background. And, you know, and so a lot of kids see this and they have a fear of missing out. And, you know, kids are comparing themselves to unrealistic standards, yet they feel very empty inside or broken. So, you know, I love this quote. Social media is like looking in the fridge over and over again. You know, there's nothing good, but you check so many times that eventually you start consuming things you don't even like. And this goes for adults also. And so as a result, we buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't even like. So, you know, with the same ease and convenience that lets you one click shop on your smartphone, it actually has a series of consequences, which some neuroscientists and psychologists call cognitive tenderization. It's based off of Tinder, the social dating app. It's a little play on words, where, you know, people become the product. They're dropped. You swipe left if you don't like, swipe right if you do. And this is based on a very primitive computer system that was not developed for kids, by the way. It was developed for adults. It was based on a system developed in the 1960s, which is a binary system of on, off, 1, 0, making a choice. And so you're swiping right or swiping left. And that's why I don't like any program, especially, you know, for young kids that are educational programs that are intended to be good, but you're just swiping right or left, because it's a forced choice situation and you're not thinking, you're just reacting. So people are being trained to just react, swipe left or swipe right or double click or one click. And, you know, life is not like that. Real life decisions should not be made impulsively with a swipe or a click. And also, this type of platform does not allow for ambiguity. And there are a lot of things in life that are going to be neither on or off or left or right, right? There's a lot of ambiguity in life and complexities and problems that are not easily solved by just making one simple choice. And we don't want people to be reactive responders. We want people to be proactive. So, you know, for us, we're digital immigrants because we did not grow up with this technology. That's what they call us. We know life before the iPhone. For Kaitlin and her group, she started, and the iPhone came out when they were in preschool. So her entire life has been in a world with this kind of technology.
Except my early
childhood. But now you see babies swiping. You can see that.
I like tell you all the time, I'm like, I'm grateful that I like
You
didn't start with it.
You didn't start swiping at one. So what the result is, we become more reactive and less proactive. And we don't want reactive adults. Reactive adults get in trouble. I'm going to stop right now. Any questions?
Yes, we have a question from Debbie B. How much of an influence are parents on their teens? I see parents scrolling in a restaurant while children are watching. And then Anne says, this is an extremely helpful lecture, especially hearing from the parent and child together. Thank you so much. And then Gila said, this is very relevant to my 8-year-old grandson, Minecraft player. And Debbie said, me too.
There you go.
Yeah.
We had
go ahead.
We had a nickname in our house that we called it Minecraft. Yeah, it's addictive. I mean, it can be addictive. It can be very addictive for kids and frustrating, because if you do one thing wrong or press the wrong button, everything you've worked on for days could go burn up on the game. Caitlin's laughing because she spent a lot of time on Minecraft. Parents, and we came head to head on it a few times. We had some real arguments about it. We're going to be honest. When she was little.
And that's when we said no.
Yeah, we
to
said
option.
no. So parents need to take control. They really have more control than they're taking, I should say, than they're realizing. And they need to engage in purpose-driven parenting.
And it starts really young as well. I mean, I've seen it
Mhm.
like with my friends. We were talking about it actually last night. Like there's so many stimulating activities that don't involve a screen that are still on the market and like that you raised me with.
Mhm.
And this, I've started to notice it now. Like the kids that I meet who use those same things in their children, we get along together. I find that really interesting, but that's how it tends to work is
Right.
the kids who use the same stuff.
We never, the only video game we had in our house was the Wii, and that was hardly used. And I also didn't want my daughter engaging in having a play date where the kids were just in a parallel situation on their iPhones or on devices. We wanted play dates to be, about engaging and working together or creating something.
Or spent in the pool
Yeah.
or playing
Yeah.
with American Girl dolls.
Or
as
going
we
to
used
playground,
do,
going to
or-
museum. So, and parents, as someone said, parents have a huge responsibility to model appropriate behavior. So when you're out to dinner, you should put the phones in your purse or make a phone basket at the dinner table. We do that every night. Phones are not allowed at the dinner table. Phones shouldn't be allowed when you're doing homework. If you need to do it for homework, it should be, maybe you can do that on the computer. But there needs to be a time and place for the phone and a time and place for sharing and conversation. Parents and kids have so little quality time together as it is. So it's really sad if you're putting up a barrier to relating by scrolling and being on your phone. That speaks to you and your issues that you should address as a parent. So how can we counteract the negative effects? That's Kaitlin. We do a lot of hiking together. Know the truth, about how phones work. And we've talked about that, and how platforms and apps work. Use positive psychology strategies to foster a greater growth mindset and a whole being approach to wellness, mental wellness, mindfulness, making a mindful choice that you're going to be more proactive and less reactive, that you're going to also make a mindful choice to be more positive and less negative, and that you want to have a future, that you want to move forward and not waste your time just scrolling or giving up your time or your dollars to apps. And practice gratitude. We've tried this. When you feel badly or if you're feeling down, think of 3 things you're grateful for just immediately. And you'll see, or you'll feel a shift in your chemistry almost. And don't resist it. It actually works to practice gratitude, and then taking action, behavioral activation. So, stop scrolling. And these are key questions to ask yourself. And this is for adults, not just kids, right? Am I seeing posts that make me happy? No, Kaitlin can do the next one. Do you follow accounts?
Yeah. I mean, do you follow accounts that make you feel like you need to be someone you're not? I mean, I can say for myself, like, obviously there's students at my school that I follow everyone in my grade and they follow me back. But sometimes there's things, it's like, okay, they're on a trip, and, sometimes obviously jealousy is innate. It happens. And so that's when I take a moment, I say, stop. That's a moment to stop.
Stop it. Are you, and along with that, are you comparing your life with others?
Right.
And is the way I'm using social media affecting my mental health negatively? So we talk about, know the truth about social media, and we've shared that with you today. And this is our warning. If an app is free, chances are you're not the customer. Instead, you're the product, and your data is being sold to advertisers. Kids like to learn that. So, the more time you guys spend on Instagram and Facebook, the more opportunities there are for those companies to collect your data, right?
Mhm.
And, they're showing you targeted ads. So, they're really smart. After a while, you start seeing pop-ups and links, right?
But yeah, like I've been trying to choose a college. I've been doing college research, and then like info pops up about my specific college. Or in past years, I've had on my like lacrosse team, we have an inside joke, and we talked about
Yeah.
Hot Pockets for one day, and all of us got Hot Pockets ads on
Yeah,
our
they're,
Facebook.
if you have enabled your microphone and camera, they're picking up on information you don't even realize. So, when we talk to kids about this, do you want to spend your day making money from Mark Zuckerberg? I don't think so. Or, making money for Google. I don't think so. And you really are. So connecting with others is something that we're built for. It's in our DNA. Our brains are wired for it. And, Caitlin's written about this, but you should think about having Spire, and this is from Whole Being Institute. This is their approach to positive psychology and whole person well-being, mind, body, spirit. And kids should have each of these elements in their life, if not every day, but every week.
Yeah,
Right.
I personally would say push for every day. I'm just looking at the R in relational right now and saying how much we all of us lost in the last couple of years due to COVID with that. And now it's more important than ever to recultivate that. And I think now is a good moment for you guys to have those conversations and to press the reset button.
Press the
because it's really
reset button, have that in your life. And, the next strategy, remember, we talked about this before, explore expectations. That's always a really good place to start in having a conversation, because it's an objective way to start discovering what might be at the center of unhappiness or disagreements or communication problems. What I might expect versus what my teen might expect. And it works in your relationships at home also and at work. And clarifying what you expect out of a situation, out of a relationship, out of an event. And are those expectations realistic? Or do you expect something from another person that, they can't deliver, or they don't understand that you expect that?
We have a question in the chat. I know some parents have such high expectations. How can a teen dialogue as a start to address this?
Yeah. So what I've found is really, really important is clear communication. And I think that goes back to what expectations are. I think your teen definitely has different expectations than the parent has. We've definitely had some different ones here and there. And so I think important things to do are definitely to have conversations with your parents, real conversations, face-to-face conversations, at least once a week, talking about what your expectations are. That might be inside the classroom, socially, athletically, whatever it may be. And to talk about what your teen's expectations are in comparison to those of your parents as well, because when those aren't aligned, there tends to be some not very pretty conversations that come out of it as well.
Here's a basic one. It's like if you have a student that's going off to college, have a real conversation exploring, well, what do you expect college to be like? And, don't judge. That's the first rule. Don't judge, listen. Don't judge. Listen. And so try to understand from their perspective what their expectations are about college. And they may, say, well, I expect it to be a lot of partying. I expect to make lots of new friends. I expect to go, to games. I expect to go to the computer lab. And, that will give you a sense of whether or not their expectations are realistic. And then if their expectations are in line with what your expectations are of them in college.
Right.
And that
we
will
can have comparison and work a compromise out as well to align with everyone's expectations.
And that will give you a platform upon which to discuss boundaries or limits or goals for each other. And, address any unrealistic or unhealthy negative expectations that people have. So, these are our final, just a recap of our strategies. Do you want to go to this one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to read off the slide here, but this is kind of everything that we covered. Feel free to take a screenshot of it, send it to your grandchildren, or to have a conversation as well with your grandchildren. It's never too early to start some of these conversations. I think that's almost even better, because you're starting, again, those face-to-face conversations with them at a young age, and it teaches them to have those conversations when they're older as well, not to disconnect with you. Like, we're very connected. Obviously, as you get older and you move away from the house, that connection changes, but to still have that in your life at some extent, and to have that habit built into your life super early as well, it becomes natural for your body and your mind as well to have those conversations.
Strengthen your relationship with your kids and grandkids. This is a great opportunity to do so, and to stop and observe what's going on in your family. Take this challenge and turn it into an opportunity to make some changes. So, Carolyn, are there any questions?
Yes, there are. We have a comment, which I think is really important. Some teens so desperately want to succeed, and they want the approval of their parents. They feel they are failing. How do we address that? And that sort of hooks into like that perfectionism, right? And where that is in the brain, and of course, social media and comparison. But that's a real challenge. Do you want to take that?
Right. So that's again where Kaitlin and I go back to the basics of having honest conversations about expectations. And, examining as the parent, well, what are your expectations really of your child? And are they realistic given the post-pandemic world and how the world's changed? Are you putting your own expectations into their head? Expectations are different than wants, and to check yourself on that, and then understand what your child's expectations are of themselves and what they expect from you as the parent.
Right. I mean, we've had instances too where, I mean, I am
She's
I'm
a
a very
perfectionist.
major perfectionist. And I think a lot of it also has to do with the people I'm surrounded by at my school as well. But for me, what I do is, when I feel as though I'm not meeting my own expectations or the expectations that I feel my parents have placed on me, you do a really good job of noticing it as well. By the way I'm acting, by the way I'm speaking to you on the phone if I'm not with you. Or also sometimes, I mean, we have a strong enough connection where I can tell you, I can say, hey, I didn't do as great as I wanted to on a math test. Like, I don't feel like I'm meeting your expectations. I don't feel like I'm doing well
And
enough.
sometimes it's just a relief when the parent says, well, I didn't expect you to get an A. I didn't expect you to be perfect. I didn't expect you to get this high score. I didn't expect you to win the game. But
it's also important to set that message before it actually happens.
Before
so
the
to say
event.
like, hey, I know this has been a really tough 2 years. Like with me, with my junior year, this is just a good example. I took some AP classes for credits that were only 10 weeks long in the fall term, and was expected to take the exam
6 months
6 months later in May.
Yeah.
And my mom told me, Kaitlin, like, I do not expect you to get a 5. I don't expect you to get
take
a 4.
the test even.
I don't expect you to do well on this test, given what your school has
Right.
done to you this year.
Yeah, because of COVID.
And that's out of the student's control.
And I think,
things like that.
when you're raising kids in New York, you're in a highly competitive fishbowl, compared to other places in the country.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stress on kids.
But have those
Yeah.
conversations.
Yep.
Is the big takeaway.
I
Any
also
other
wanted
questions?
you to address, if you could address failure. In other words, and expectations a little bit more. Like, for example, I happen to know that, Kaitlin, you had a goal and a dream to play a sport.
Yes.
Right.
College and you're not.
Yep.
And that that kind of evaporated. And how you manage that, that's a situation that a lot of teens and kids are facing. They had an idea, whether it was the prom or whether it was a trip or whether it was, going to college on a scholarship for a sport. We've had in this period of time, these last 2 years, young people have to deal with either delayed gratification in a way or just a changing situation. I want to say, I don't know if failure is the right word, but just like, oh my God, what a dream that I had. Disappointment's a better word. Disappointment, frustration, and the parent has their disappointment too, because they want what's best for their child. Do you guys want to address that at all? Because I think that's very much where we are.
That's a really
Yeah.
profound question. I think one thing is that in this situation in life, post-pandemic, you're not alone. You're not, it's unique because it's happening to you, yes, but
You told me that all the time.
you're not alone. There are thousands of kids who did not get scholarships because there's no room on the bench. They have a backlog of athletes. There's thousands of kids that didn't get scholarship, and that's painful because most of them need it. So it's a great disappointment and it's a financial hardship. There are also, kids that missed out on key aspects of growing up. Graduation, proms, learning to drive.
Leadership program
Yeah,
for me. I
leadership
lost it
opportunities, volunteer opportunities, internships. So you have to move forward to a next project or goal.
twice. The next thing.
the
Look
next
to a next
thing
thing.
that will make you feel
Like
like
you have something to look forward to.
Right.
That's
And
really important.
that will make you feel empowered, like you learned something or did something. So the key is to try to find something that you will feel empowered by, interested in, where you will feel like you're making a difference or helping someone. One of the reasons why kids like sports so much or other activities is because that's their identity. And
Yeah.
they've lost their identity. And so be open in that conversation, authentic in that conversation about the pain. And then, well, what are we going to do? You're more than just that sport. You're more than just an athlete, or you're more than just, someone in the band.
Right. And there's ways to also stay involved as well. I think there's more out there than one meets the eye, especially in terms of intramural sports and club teams when it comes to just college specifically. With athletics, using your example, you can manage a team. I've had friends do that. I've had friends also, I have friends doing crazy, they're pivoting like crazy. Like one of my best friends is spending another year in high school just so she can play the sport she loves in college.
So, you have to pivot and shift and find other opportunities that will make you feel like you have an identity, that you have self-worth, and you're competent and empowered.
Last question. Do you feel that today's teens, because they've gone through the pandemic, are actually more resilient than pre-pandemic?
I do.
I do.
You do.
Yeah, I do. I think especially there's this really, really small cohort, I think, of kids. My age group is kind of in the middle of it. I think a little like 5 years older than me, and I'd say 4 years younger than me, that have really been hit extremely hard just because they're going through this point in their life that's just an extreme change.
Caitlin's a senior. The last time she had a normal year, she was a freshman.
Yeah. We were talking about this the other day.
So
the last time I sat under the tent where we have graduation as a freshman, and now I'm graduating.
So I think they are more resilient, and they're going to come through this stronger and more flexible.
Yeah, I think when they go into the workforce as well, they're going to be used to these changes. It's almost going to be like innate, like expected almost. I expect it.
Yeah,
to me,
it's a strength.
normal.
So we're positive about it.
This is awesome. I just want to thank you both so much for
you're
being
welcome.
with
Thank
us
you
today,
for having us.
and for, don't you think, everybody, just and a very insightful conversation. And I learned so much. It's nice to hear your voice again, Sherry. We're going to hear you on Monday. Again, I want everyone to join us on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for Brain Health Awareness next week. Sherry will kick it off about the influence of digital media on aging. And Kaitlin, it's just nice to hear your voice, your perspective. Don't you agree, everyone? I hear, yeah, got some applause.
Oh.
And, you are teaching us. You are teaching us, make no mistake. So thank you both. I'm going to take off.
These are like a family to us. So thanks so much.
Absolutely. I'm at the JCC now. You can see it in the background. Do come in, you guys. We're back in the saddle, as they say in Texas. So come on in. And next week we'll have Melissa Carissimo doing poetic selfies in the lobby at 10:30. So please come. I'm going to remove all the spotlights. Feel free to unmute everyone if you'd like, and just thank our speakers.